Big round of applause to Martin, please. You all right?
Yeah, good.
Grab a seat there if you fancy, and grab this as well. So, just a bit of scene setting. A slightly more general point, and it's basic, but it's interesting. What does an advisor, any form of advisor, actually do?
Glib answer, advises.
Yeah, come on, more than that.
But I think, I suppose, brings the benefit of experience. We're not in your shoes, but we've worked with people who have, and sometimes we may have been in your shoes. I think we're a sort of critical friend, or we should be a critical friend. We can bring experience, but we're not invested in quite the same way that you are, so we can bring some distance and passionate for your success, but an element of dispassion and critical perspective.
Could you give an example of that critical friend, critical perspective, probably anonymised, but whichever you wish, about how when someone has requested or suggested X, you said, but hang on, why?
I suppose the point, as a lawyer, right? I think the role of lawyers is basically twofold. One is to help businesses grow. It's also to protect businesses. So I suppose you can be a critical friend in looking at all of that, in both of those perspectives. I can give this example, I think.
Yeah.
I worked on the founding of Metrobank, so in 2010, and started working with this tiny team in a sort of, pre-WeWork, I suppose, sort of team of 5 looking to bring a first high street bank to the UK in over 100 years. Quite traditional in that sense, but actually it was the first time for the UK that actually they were trying to build an outsourced banking model. So they were going to buy in a banking engine, buy in lots of other services and have a lean bank. And had to sort of have a quite stern talking to them quite early on, to the project team, because they were thinking quite small. They were thinking immediate next step, but actually they're signing up to a banking engine deal with a really big Swiss banking engine provider, and they're not building a bank for next week or next month. They're building a bank for 10, 20, years and so on. And they needed to shift from they brought in a project team. This wasn't this was a delivery team, a project team. They weren't going to be the ones running the bank in the longer term, but that project team needed to think like the future bank. So trying to educate and be critical in the sort of their mental approach, and bringing my experience of working with FTSE 100 businesses or other large providers, and setting expectations. And guess what? People wanted to work with them, so it worked.
And I guess, we'll come on to this. So I guess it's part of this reflects the asymmetry between advisors who have experience across multiple areas and scales of businesses and so on, and an entrepreneur who is at whatever stage of the journey just simply does not have that. You've got a frame of reference beyond it. But also just like to comment on this, that on the whole, I think most entrepreneurs think of an advisor, at least initially, as a vertical skill set. It might be taxation advice, it might be about contract, it might be M&A work, whatever it is. But actually, the real value of advisors is the horizontal. It's the bigger picture stuff. So how do you go from providing a specific skill or service to a client to becoming a trusted advisor?
Well, I think there are different needs at different points in the market, and you'll get lawyers and accountants and other types of advisors who are quite sort of linear and focused. And actually, there's a lot of clients who just need that thing done, and that's great, and they'll go to the people that can do it. But I think for those entrepreneurs or those businesses on a growth journey or scaling journey where you're finding your feet, you're coming to market, I think actually sort of mental agility in your advisors is necessary, because that's what you've got to have as an entrepreneur and business leader. And actually, so I worked, before I joined the firm, partner at Burges Salmon now, but I worked in-house for 10 years in industry, and ran legal teams and risk teams.
How was that for you personally? It's a quick compare and contrast about working in-house opposed to working for an advisory firm.
I've actually found the transition quite really good and positive. It was sort of occasioned by a move from London to the southwest and sort of throwing everything in the air during COVID. I'd had 10 years to begin with in large law firms, so I sort of had got experience. It is in a sense, what I miss is the closeness to a particular business and really developing a product and a proposition and being in the team, inherently part of the team. And I thought I'd missed that a lot, and I do to a degree. But actually, what I find is I've replaced it with lots of relationships like that. So I actually feel it's like a real privilege to be an external advisor, because I've got really strong relationships with lots of clients now. I mean, I'm not with them every day, all the time. But I get this really nice view across the market. And I suppose to your point around perspective, because I've been in industry and now in practice, worked for 5 years at Funding Circle and now work for lots of clients, I have got perspective, and I've seen things and done things that are relevant. And I'm not going to, well, it's not in my nature, and I don't think it's helpful to just sit and wait for somebody to ask a specific question to get a specific answer. I think actually it's about a conversation, it's about iteration, it's about sort of riffing and sharing ideas. Got a client who is based in Germany, but actually it was a sort of two-man band when I started talking to them. They decided to launch their product in the UK. So they had an idea, but they thought the UK market would be more favourable for their proposition. So they came to us with an idea and basically a compliance problem, regulatory problem, which sort of meant, will the product work or won't it? They'd been to some other advisors and they sort of were told that this isn't going to work. They came to us and we had another look at it. We found a path through. I mean, some risk acceptance in that process, but they found a path through. And we built this relationship now where it's sort of so close. I've been on the journey with them as their product's iterated. I've represented them to the regulators, got a clean bill of health. I've been, in the last few months, been joining them on sales calls to explain the proposition and why it's okay. I suppose some might say that's too close a relationship. Am I losing the
Is there any such thing as too close from your point of view or from Burges Salmon's point of view?
Well, I personally don't think so. I mean, I have my professional duties, but I'm a professional of 25 years as a lawyer. I think I can bring closeness and experience and a passion for their business, but maintain professional integrity. I mean, I think that's perfectly possible.
I want to move on to a potentially thornier issue of costs and costs versus value. They're two perhaps separate points. There's a widespread apprehension, maybe even a prejudice, that, and I say this respectfully to Burges Salmon, but to all lawyers and indeed financial advisors and so on, widespread apprehension that you're on the clock, that the costs are racking up each time you have a conversation, and that you're focused on your chargeable hours. And so how do you advise when it comes to costs? How do you advise working with advisors, and what should they be looking for from you so that they don't have that apprehension of even just the most basic thing, I'm being charged or whatever. How does that work for you? And indeed, Burges Salmon more
different lawyers will have different approaches, but we're sponsoring this great conference because we're really committed to this sort of entrepreneurial startup scale-up community. And I think the firm, this coincided with me arriving at the firm and others with other colleagues, had to reassess how we priced and approached work. Like, the firm is proudly, headquartered in Bristol. It's still our biggest office by far, but we play a lot in national and international work and client base for really big institutions and the government. But it felt like we were potentially missing a trick, both in our home market of the Southwest, but also really cool, interesting, exciting businesses, like Evangelos was talking about, his business. So we had to have this sort of proper discussions in the firm about how we could better serve a sort of more startup scale-up community. That part of that is pricing. Part of that is a commitment from the firm to support that, and also interest of lawyers, partners, and other lawyers to sort of really nurture and work with that.
But sorry, just to come to that very point. So, there may be an apprehension that Burges Salmon and other companies, because they are of a scale, a major size, that you're not so concerned with the ecosystem. At what point, what size of businesses might you get involved?
Well, to make it a bit more personal to me, I was an in-house lawyer. I moved from London, where my network was, to the Southwest, and suddenly in a law practice having to hit some billable targets, which is my issue, not yours. But I'm basically building a business for myself. There was no work given to me, so I'm basically hustling for work. I had a super low entry threshold, but I was
How,
encouraged
how,
to do
how
this.
super low entry threshold is that? Do you, I mean, pro bono work, or just simply
Yeah.
just unpaid? Well, not pro bono, but uncharged.
For sure. And I'll come back to the point about the clock being on and
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
because it's a slightly
yeah,
different point.
please,
But I onboarded clients and did work that we charged them like £1,000, much more value created, but they couldn't afford to pay much. It was interesting. I just wanted to feel useful. So and I had support from my partners to do work. I mean, it's good for the soul to actually be useful. And actually, some of those relationships have gone nowhere. Others of them were sort of friends of mine who set up businesses, and now they're heading into sort of substantial 5-figure, 6-figure clients because their businesses are growing. So there's a commercial long-term view, and I think to this point around, is the clock always on? I mean, absolutely not. I mean, well, certainly my experience and the colleagues I work with. I'm one of the clients I work with at the moment. It's Bristol-based actually, called Balance Strategic Capital. They've got a target to set up a new bank, which is super exciting.
And you've got previous there, so you'll be a good advisor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they wanted to work with local advisors, and I'd set up a bank before, so it's all worked quite well. And I started talking to that founding team when they were still employed as commercial bankers in a private bank in Bristol. We spent tens of hours talking about the concept, about the approach, what they could expect. Yes, they then did quit their jobs, but we'd done. They only did that when they had committed funding. So we did basically a full pre-seed round on the expectation of it raising and then as getting paid at very competitive rates. But we were taking a view on them because we thought they were great, the business idea had legs, and there was a sort of opportunity. That's an example, and they're doing really well. I mean, they're still in the they're doing a proof of concept phase now, and
that's now public that they are active.
Yeah, they've got a website,
That's
Balance
right,
Strategic Capital. They're doing a proof of concept pre-banking license, which is exciting, and the team there is growing. And so they've been a success and it's worked, but we talk to anyone all the time with no expectation. I suppose maybe no expectation, but a hope it might go somewhere.
In a sense, you are talent spotters. That of course there's a vested self-interest. Of course you would wish to identify an interesting company in the hope that, but also contribute to their growth. And I wonder if there's even an endorsement loop that cuts in there that says if you are as an entrepreneur, just a little bit like as Steph was talking about with our awards, having a form of recognition, or in this case, a major player actually reach out and spend time. It helps validate. Is that going too far? Do you think you're helping validate early stage businesses by your involvement?
I think so. I hope so. I mean, I think it's a sort of mutual appreciation society. We get validation for our work by being able to refer to our client base, and if they want to use us to validate the fact that they've looked at things properly and seriously and they're sensible and know what they're doing, then that's fine. I think the sort of it's fine for validation and a badge, but of course the real measure of success is actually the delivery. And we've got clients now or potential clients who say, well, we've done a seed round somewhere else, but through using a sort of platform type approach, and now we're moving to a Series A. We think we want to sort of we need to sort of lawyer up a bit more.
Is that a term, lawyering up?
100%. And they'll speak to us, and we'll talk to them. What can we expect from a Series A? My colleague Alex, who's around yesterday, corporate tech lawyer, he'll review term sheets and give notes. I mean, no charge for that. It's just sort of trying to be useful, trying to feed back into the ecosystem, with the hope that we're remembered, but there's no tie-in.
So one other aspect, I'll throw it open to audience questions in a moment, and this is about how you as entrepreneurs get value from advisors per se. And one of the benefits that certainly larger scale advisors have, for example, is their own networks, their own contacts, their own other clients, but their reach and so on. Talk a little bit about that, about the network effect.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, why people are here is for a network, and we're part of the network. I mean, when I was working in-house in London, I was part of a government committee on fintech, and actually if you're in a sort of scale-up startup environment, I think often it is common that the mindset is to share notes, to take, but also to contribute. You get back what you sort of input, and I think that's why would that be any different for lawyers? I mean, often we're the butt of jokes, but we're sort of in the game as well. We're in the system. We've got I've got, like on the screen earlier, mentions up for one of the awards. I recognise the name Goodwith. Gabriella from Goodwith is a super data science business. She's based in Bude in Cornwall. She's not a client, but I got a client, Experian, big data provider, and what she does is amazing, I think. And I'm like, I connected her to Experian. She's not even a client. I just wanted to match them together. Balanced Strategic Capital, they're looking to prove their concept, so they will lend into VCs and private equity, so debt for leveraging private equity, and so they're like, we think the Scottish market is underserved as well as the whole of the UK and Europe. So actually, you've got an office in Edinburgh. Can you introduce us to some local sort of VCs in Edinburgh? Like, yes, sure.
And Edinburgh is a terrific financial base, and that opportunity of the larger West Country region, particularly Bristol and Edinburgh, is quite an interplay. So I'll throw it open at this point. As underlying principles of how you as entrepreneurs, as individuals, seek to get value from advisors. We've touched on the cost point, for example. There's maybe more in that territory. Or not. Please don't be cautious about, and whilst of course this is about Burges Salmon itself, it's more generally about advisors.
All the law firms exist. Worked in a few.
Allegedly so. Well, right, I come to this one, which is, you've sort of touched on this, is anything too small?
For some lawyers, probably yes. I would say no. I mean, because you don't know what's coming down the line. Like, I did a piece of work for a new client. It was a small piece of work, single-digit thousands. Interesting piece of advice, because I think I think about work. Why do I do it? Because I think I really like meeting the people. I think the issues are really interesting. I like helping businesses grow. So yes, we're a business, but it's also about what's interesting, what's topical, what's interesting for the team. We've got a bunch of lawyers that we need to give work to. What's interesting for them. There's lots of what's learning. I mean, there's lots of different reasons for doing work, and it's not just financial. No. I sort of think, for my own practice, I sort of think of it almost, it's like a portfolio. There are some clients that are very big, that pay very good rates, but the stakes are very high, so that's okay. But then there are other clients that are smaller. It's a bit more speculative. The work is smaller, but we'll do it if we can. And a good advisor should tell you when they can't. But it might lead somewhere else. There might be further work down the line. It's a long-term relationship, I think we're targeting.
And in that long-term relationship point, I want to come back to the point about asymmetry, that for anyone who's been through, as Evangelos was talking about, but of funding rounds, of exits, of selling a business, of M&A work, of more generally, I think at the point at which you are in that, and you're in the trenches, that's when you realise the value of advisors. You are trying to figure out in real time how to get something to happen. So talk about that asymmetry. An entrepreneur on the whole will have a singular experience of creating, growing, doing, loving, whatever, dreaming. But you've got that horizontality. And how does that interplay with an entrepreneur about the advice you give on those incredibly pressured moments?
Well, I think there's certain key events in a business's life. It can be to do with people and crossing through a barrier where you actually don't know everyone really in your business anymore, or it could be launching in a new market overseas, or it could be an exit event. I mean, these are all really significant events in a business's sort of journey, and I think it's not about, well, speaking as a lawyer, it's not just about legal advice or regulatory advice. It's about the context of it. It's about the experience of it. I mean, I've worked in several in-house roles, in three of which, Wonga Funding Circle and World Remit, now ZEPS, increasingly significant businesses in scale. We've launched in new markets. Funding Circle went through an IPO. At one point at Funding Circle, we were taking on 50 staff a month. We went from 100 staff when I joined to well over 1,000. Like a lot of that scaling journey, the growing pains. I mean, I was on the executive board at World Remit, which is a $5 billion business. I've I wouldn't actually use the phrase entrepreneur for myself. I'm not going to be so bold. I'm not the founder. I'm not the risk taker as such. I've taken risks in my career, but I'm not the risk taker. But I've been in the shoes. I've been on that journey. I mean, I've spoken to some very large businesses who have never launched overseas before and won a sounding board for it. So I think, yes, you can expect and demand the benefit of experience. I'm not exactly sure why you wouldn't have that as of right if you're speaking to your advisors, because yes, okay, you need somebody to paper the documents, but that's really only part of it. And I think, taking an exit event, I mean, there's lots of different routes to go. Is it trade? Is it private equity? Is it an IPO? Maybe the exit result is sort of the same, cash in the pocket, a bit more freedom, moving to a non-exec role or something. But the process is entirely different, and the pressures and scrutiny is very different.
We'll have one example of that a little bit later about employee ownership trusts. There's a piece with Gius Verdi about that particular narrative arc as well. I think what's underpinning this, you touched on this about papering the documentation or a phrase like that. What's underpinning this, of course, the tech specs, as it were, of what it is to be a financial advisor or a legal advisor, if not quite given, they're certainly expected. It's a very regulated environment. You would expect competency at a very base level of competency. But really, your world and other advisors is about trust. Yeah. How do you inculcate a sense of trust between an entrepreneur and you as an individual, or the practice as a whole?
Well, I think that's why doing a small piece of work sometimes can be beneficial, because you start to build trust. Deliver on price, on time, with a good quality output. It's the start of a process. I think why would people choose advisors? I mean, trust is built over time. But would you choose an advisor? I think you choose an advisor. Certainly, I did when I was in a house and appointing advisors, both financial and legal, because I thought the team could do the job, because I liked them, thought they were user friendly. There was good usability factor. Cost would be right, obviously, and also market knowledge. Like that experience, I think, is a fundamental part of it. My particular area is sort of e-commerce, tech, and fintech. But if it's to do with automotive, then I've got a great colleague, Lucy, who is all over autonomous vehicles. So I'm not going to guess it. That's the benefit of a larger firm. It's a multi-specialist environment. So we're coming towards the end of this. Any last tips for? Sorry, there's a question here. Sorry, can we get the mic into the middle? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gemma McGrattan. Giles and I have just exited, and I think lawyers can really help you be brave, and you can back the entrepreneur. And one example of that is Giles was negotiating a 100-page contract with a potential new client. It took all year to negotiate that contract, but it would be a game changer, and that was with a bank. And my perception was that we'll never be able to negotiate with, a giant like that. We're a 40-man team, but the lawyers really helped us go through that process and negotiate those clauses. And we got to a really good kind of point of conversation with us. And I just don't think you can do that on your own. You've got somebody to back you, to support you, and to point out how to go about that negotiation. And I just think that was just a game changer for us. So I just think it helps you be brave.
I think it's a really nice way to put it, isn't it? I mean,
it's lovely.
It's not just about the delivery of the product, it's about helping, that hackneyed phrase, helping the journey, demystify it, give confidence in it. And I think that's what I mean by the experience and the sort of the context around the transaction. Working on a big deal at the moment for a big, it's Bath-based actually, but big company.
Would you like to tell us more about that?
I can't at the moment.
But nonetheless, giving us perhaps the sector or something, a little bit of a stick.
It's financial services, entering into a 10-year contract. The heads of terms are 70 pages. The ultimate contract will be, massive. And actually demystifying it, working through it, taking responsibility for it, and leading them through. But obviously, it's their deal, getting the input, but I think demystifying it, helping manage stress levels, pushing stress onto us, because actually I don't find it stressful because it's my job. I think that the sort of relationship element, I agree, it's really important. I think you've expressed it really nicely.
And Gemma expressed many things really nicely yesterday, talked about her journey of creating, growing and then selling a business. And by the way, all of these talks will be available subsequently on YouTube and on our Entrepreneur channel. And I'd also pick up a point that Evangelos said about the need to recognise expertise and bring in experts. In many ways, we think of that in terms of a team, of course, executives, people, etc. But that's also what advisors are. They are part of an expertise set, which is valuable, deeply valuable at very pressured times, such as exiting or major contracts. Last thoughts, Martin, from you. Some quick last top tips for entrepreneurs of how to get the most out of their advisors.
I would probably say engage early. Like if you're thinking about an exit, don't engage lawyers at the time of exit. I mean, you can, but actually, isn't it more useful to have them know you and your business and to help you on that journey? As I say, if it's a trade deal and they're going to be poring over the operations, actually, you know where the dead bodies are, and you've got a plan around that already. Metaphorically, obviously.
Yeah.
So engage early. I think a good advisor is somebody who is invested in the relationship for long term. It doesn't mean you're each on the phone to them all the time. It's not necessarily a needy relationship, but there is a relationship and it's long term and there's a good understanding and that ability to pick up the phone and chat something through. So there is trust built over time. There is an understanding of the business that's built over time. I think I like it when clients get in touch to say, we thought we'd update you on what we're doing, just so you're aware. I think that's a really nice thing. But also, I think you can expect really good lawyers who understand your business to be proactive and to do the same back to you. So really, relationship, I think law and other advisory businesses really are people businesses, both because we're delivering knowledge capital into clients, we're also people dealing with people. So actually, if the relationship and the communication works, then really everything flows from that.
Everything flows from communication, conversation, contacts, and indeed conferences. Martin, on behalf of us, that was all lots of C's there, wasn't it? On behalf of all, thanks indeed to Burges Salmon and to you for the session. Thank you. Very good. Thanks.